Behind the laughs of this UPN sitcom lay a world of creative clashes, tragic losses, and bizarre coincidences that most fans never discovered. From a co-star who moonlighted as a professional wrestler to a show that accidentally became a gay bar comedy, Malcolm Eddie's 4-season run was filled with more drama off-screen than on. These surprising secrets reveal how two comedy legends from completely different schools of humor created television magic while fighting behind the scenes. Fact 1. Cosby versus Pryor comedy clash. Malcolm and Eddie might have seemed like best friends on screen, but behind the cameras, their two stars were locked in a constant battle over what comedy should look like. Malcolm Jamal Warner, who had spent 8 years on The Cosby Show, learning Bill Cosby's approach to humor, found himself working alongside Eddie Griffin, whose raw and edgy style was directly inspired by comedy legend Richard Pryor. Warner later described this tension perfectly when he said they were putting the school of Bill Cosby and the school of Richard Pryor together as a team, which created frequent creative conflicts throughout the show's 4-season run. The clash went much deeper than just different styles of telling jokes. Warner had come from a groundbreaking show that proved African American families could be funny without relying on stereotypes or crude humor, while Griffin's comedy background embraced a more street-smart, anything-goes approach that often played into the very stereotypes Warner was trying to avoid. This fundamental disagreement about comedy philosophy led to heated arguments between the two actors, with Warner constantly fighting against what he saw as writers and producers pandering to racial cliches. The tension became so intense that Warner later admitted there was so much fighting on the show with writers, producers, and the studio that it became a genuinely difficult experience for him. Despite their professional differences, both actors managed to put their conflicts aside when the cameras rolled, creating the chemistry that made Malcolm and Eddie work as characters. However, the behind-the-scenes drama reveals just how challenging it can be when two completely different approaches to comedy are forced to work together on the same project. Fact 2. The 11-episode syndication disaster. Malcolm and Eddie ended its run in the year 2000 with exactly 89 episodes, which might seem like a respectable number for any television show, but this total represented one of the most frustrating near misses in television history. The show was canceled just 11 episodes short of reaching 100 episodes, which is the magic number that television networks and distributors consider the minimum threshold for a profitable syndication deal. Malcolm Jamal Warner knew exactly how important reaching this milestone would be for his career and financial future, which made the cancellation especially painful for him. Syndication deals are where television actors and producers make their biggest profits, since successful shows can earn millions of dollars when they're sold to local stations and cable networks for reruns. Warner had already experienced the benefits of syndication success with The Cosby Show, which became one of the most valuable syndicated programs in television history, so he understood what he was missing out on when Malcolm and Eddie fell short of the goal. The cruel irony of the situation was that the show had managed to survive for 4 full seasons on UPN, proving it had enough of an audience to justify its existence, but the network made the decision to pull the plug right when it was approaching the finish line. Warner later revealed in interviews that his hope of reaching syndication was one of the main reasons he stayed with the show, despite all the creative conflicts and behind-the-scenes fighting he experienced. The 11-episode gap between 89 and 100 might seem small, but in the television business, it represented the difference between a show that could generate ongoing revenue for years and one that would largely disappear from the airwaves after its initial run ended. Fact 3. Co-star's secret wrestling career. While most viewers knew Jaime Cardriche as Tim, the gentle giant who worked as a male nurse and hung out at McGee's bar, few fans realized that this actor was living a double life as a professional wrestler. Cardriche performed in wrestling rings under the intimidating persona of the Harlem Warlord, creating a stark contrast between his sweet-natured television character and his aggressive wrestling personality. This dual career wasn't something from his distant past either, as Cardriche continued wrestling professionally even while filming Malcolm and Eddie throughout the show's run from 1996 to 2000. The logistics of maintaining both careers must have been incredibly challenging, since professional wrestling requires extensive physical training and travel schedules that could easily conflict with television production timelines. Kardrish somehow managed to balance both worlds without either career suffering significantly. The irony of his wrestling persona couldn't have been more different from his role on the sitcom, where Tim was portrayed as one of the most likable and non-threatening characters on the show. While the Harlem Warlord was designed to intimidate opponents and wrestling audiences with aggressive moves and trash-talking, Tim on Malcolm and Eddie was known for being kind-hearted, thoughtful, and often the voice of reason when Malcolm and Eddie got into their various schemes and conflicts. Kardrish's background as both a college athlete and professional wrestler certainly helped him with the physical comedy aspects of his television role, though most viewers probably never suspected that the actor playing their favorite gentle giant was capable of body-slamming opponents in wrestling rings across the country. His ability to completely transform between these two very different personas shows just how talented he was, as both an entertainer and athlete. Fact 4. Tragic death during final season. The Malcolm and Eddie family was struck by devastating tragedy when Jaime Kardrish passed away on July 28, 2000, just 2 months after the series had aired its final episode on May 22nd of that same year. The 32-year-old actor died from complications that occurred during what should have been a routine gallbladder surgery, turning a standard medical procedure into an unexpected catastrophe that shocked everyone who knew him. Kardrish had been a beloved presence on the show since its premiere in 1996, appearing in 45 episodes over the first 3 seasons as Tim, the kind-hearted nurse who became one of the most popular supporting characters among fans. His character served as a stabilizing force in the chaotic world of Malcolm and Eddie, often providing wisdom and comic relief when the main characters found themselves in trouble due to their various schemes and misunderstandings. The timing of his death made it particularly heartbreaking for the cast and crew, since they had just finished celebrating the completion of their 4-season journey together when they received the devastating news. Kardrish had grown up in Cerritos, California, and had attended Oklahoma State University, where he played both football and basketball before pursuing his entertainment career, which included not only acting but also his work as a professional wrestler. His final acting appearance was actually in an episode of The Parkers, which aired after Malcolm and Eddie had ended, making that performance a bittersweet farewell to his television career. The loss of such a young and talented performer, who had successfully balanced multiple careers in both acting and professional wrestling, left a significant impact on everyone who had worked with him during the show's production years. Fact 5. Warner fought against racial stereotypes. Malcolm Jamal Warner found himself in constant battles with the writers and producers of Malcolm and Eddie because they wanted to create comedy that relied on racial stereotypes, which went against everything he had learned during his 8 years on The Cosby Show. Warner had come from a groundbreaking series that proved African-American characters could be funny, intelligent, and relatable without falling back on tired cliches or negative portrayals that had dominated television for decades. When Warner joined the UPN network after The Cosby Show ended, he expected that his experience with creating positive representation would be valued by the new show's creative team. Instead, he discovered that UPN's programming strategy was focused on what they called urban audiences, and the network's executives believed that meant embracing exactly the kind of stereotypical humor that The Cosby Show had worked so hard to move beyond. Warner later revealed that this disconnect made Malcolm and Eddie an incredibly difficult and frustrating experience for him, as he spent enormous amounts of energy fighting with writers, producers, and studio executives who had a completely different vision for what the show should be. He felt that UPN had brought him onto the project specifically because of his background with non-stereotypical comedy. But once production began, it became clear that the network actually wanted him to participate in the exact opposite approach. The actor described this period as particularly challenging because he believed that television had already proven that audiences of all backgrounds could connect with African-American characters who were portrayed as complex, educated, and successful people rather than as one-dimensional figures based on harmful assumptions. His ongoing resistance to the network's preferred direction created tension that lasted throughout the show's entire four-season run. Fact 6. The show's Kansas City connection. Malcolm and Eddie was deliberately set in Kansas City, Missouri, which happened to be Eddie Griffin's actual hometown, making it one of the rare television sitcoms that authentically represented this major Midwestern city rather than defaulting to the usual New York or Los Angeles locations that dominated most comedy shows of the 1990s. This choice wasn't just a random decision by the writers and producers, but rather a meaningful way to ground the show in a real place that Griffin knew intimately from his own life experiences growing up there. Griffin had been born and raised in Kansas City, where he was voted class clown 3 years in a row during high school, and eventually opened his own dance studio at the young age of 16, even choreographing halftime shows for the Kansas City Chiefs professional football team before he discovered his talent for stand-up comedy. The Kansas City setting gave the show an authentic feel that many sitcoms lacked, since Griffin could draw on his genuine knowledge of the city's neighborhoods, culture, and local references when developing his character and contributing to storylines. Most television comedies of that era were filmed on studio lots in California and set in either major coastal cities or generic suburban locations that could represent anywhere in America. So having a show specifically rooted in a distinctive Midwestern city like Kansas City provided a unique flavor. The decision to use Griffin's real hometown also allowed the show to incorporate authentic local details and references that wouldn't have been possible if the creators had chosen a setting that none of the main cast members actually knew well. This connection between the actor and the location helped create a sense of place that felt genuine rather than manufactured, even though the actual filming still took place on television studio sets rather than on location in Missouri. Fact 7. Full House creators' unexpected project. Malcolm and Eddie was produced by Jeff Franklin Productions, the exact same production company that created and produced Full House, one of the most wholesome and family-friendly sitcoms in television history, creating an almost unbelievable contrast between the two shows' completely different tones and target audiences. Jeff Franklin had built his reputation in the television industry by creating squeaky clean family entertainment that parents could comfortably watch with their young children, with Full House serving as the perfect example of his approach to comedy that relied on heartwarming lessons, innocent humor, and storylines that always ended with everyone learning something valuable about love and family. The show featured Danny Tanner raising his 3 daughters with help from his brother-in-law and best friend, and every episode was designed to reinforce positive values while providing gentle laughs that wouldn't offend anyone. The shift from producing Full House to working on Malcolm and Eddie represented a dramatic departure for Franklin's production company, since the UPN sitcom dealt with adult themes, relationship conflicts, and the kind of edgy humor that would have been completely inappropriate for the wholesome family audience that had made Full House such a massive success. While Full House focused on elementary school problems and the importance of family dinners, Malcolm and Eddie explored topics like dating complications, financial struggles, and the challenges of running a business in an urban setting. This transition shows how television producers and production companies often have to adapt their creative approaches when working with different networks and targeting different demographics, even when it means moving away from the formula that originally made them successful. Franklin's ability to successfully produce both types of shows demonstrates the versatility required to survive in the television industry during the 1990s. Fact 8. The Prince That Never Came. One of the most ambitious storylines in Malcolm and Eddie's first season involved Eddie somehow managing to book one of the biggest music superstars in the world for the grand reopening of their newly purchased bar, but the episode titled "Someday My Taff Cap Will Come" ended up becoming a perfect example of how even the best-laid plans can fall apart at the worst possible moment. Eddie had used his connections and charm to arrange for Taff Cap, which stood for the artist formerly known as Prince, to perform live at McGee's Sports Bar during their big reopening celebration that Malcolm had been planning and preparing for weeks. This booking represented a massive coup for their small Kansas City establishment. Since Prince was at the height of his fame and popularity during the mid-1990s, and having him perform would have guaranteed their bar's success and brought them more customers than they could have ever imagined. However, the episode took a dramatic turn when engine trouble with Prince's transportation prevented the superstar from actually arriving at the bar for his scheduled performance, leaving Malcolm and Eddie scrambling to figure out how to salvage their grand reopening event without their headline act. Rather than letting the evening become a complete disaster, Eddie stepped up to fill the entertainment gap himself, taking the stage to keep the show alive and ensure that their customers still had a memorable experience despite the unexpected setback. This storyline captured the unpredictable nature of the entertainment business, where even confirmed bookings with major celebrities can fall through due to circumstances completely beyond anyone's control, forcing entrepreneurs like Malcolm and Eddie to think quickly and adapt their plans when reality doesn't match their expectations. Fact 9. Accidental Gay Bar Episode. Malcolm and Eddie accidentally transformed their sports bar into Kansas City's newest gay hangout when their attempt to create advertising with broad appeal went hilariously wrong, leading to one of the most unexpected storylines in the show's entire 4-season run. The mishap began when the two business partners decided they needed to expand their customer base beyond their usual crowd of sports fans and neighborhood regulars who frequented McGee's. Their marketing plan seemed simple enough at first, as they wanted to create promotional materials that would attract a wider variety of customers to increase their profits and make their bar more successful. However, their inexperience with advertising and their misunderstanding of what constituted broad appeal resulted in promotional campaigns that sent completely unintended signals to potential customers throughout the Kansas City area. The situation escalated when their new advertising strategy actually succeeded in bringing in customers, but not the diverse, sports-loving crowd they had originally envisioned for their establishment. Instead, Malcolm and Eddie discovered that their bar had become a popular destination for gay customers who had interpreted their promotional materials as welcoming signals specifically directed toward the gay community. Initially, both characters struggled to figure out how to handle their unexpected new clientele, since this wasn't the result they had planned when they started their advertising campaign. However, as the storyline developed, they realized that their new customers were actually spending significantly more money than their previous regulars had, which forced them to reconsider whether their accidental transformation might actually be beneficial for their business, even if it wasn't what they had originally intended when they first started trying to broaden their bar's appeal. Fact 10. The Magoo's Sign Disaster. Malcolm's carefully planned rededication ceremony for their newly renamed sports bar turned into a public relations nightmare when the sign company misspelled their establishment's name as Magoo's instead of McGee's. But this embarrassing mistake became permanently documented on citywide television news due to an incredibly unfortunate coincidence involving a bomb threat. The episode, titled "It's the Bomb," showed Malcolm's frustration as he prepared to officially transition the bar from its original name of Kelly's to the new name of McGee's, which was supposed to reflect his ownership and give the establishment a fresh identity that would attract more customers. However, when the new sign was installed, Malcolm discovered that the sign makers had somehow managed to misspell his own last name, creating the ridiculous business name of Magoo's that made his bar sound more like a children's cartoon than a serious sports establishment. The timing of this discovery couldn't have been worse, because just as Malcolm was dealing with the sign crisis, a crazed football fan who was protesting rumors about the Kansas City Chiefs potentially moving to Los Angeles decided to take over the crowded bar with a bomb threat. This dangerous situation immediately attracted the attention of local television news crews, who arrived to cover what they thought would be a standard hostage situation at a Kansas City sports bar. Unfortunately for Malcolm, all of the television coverage that aired throughout the Kansas City area featured prominent shots of the misspelled Magoo's sign, which meant that thousands of viewers across the city were introduced to his establishment under the wrong name. The irony was that Malcolm finally got the widespread publicity he had always wanted for his bar, but it came at the worst possible moment and featured the completely incorrect name that made his business look unprofessional. Fact 11. Married, with children director connection. Amanda Bears, who spent 11 years playing the uptight neighbor Marcy Darcy on the long-running Fox sitcom Married, with Children, stepped behind the camera to direct 3 episodes of Malcolm and Eddie during the show's first 2 seasons between 1996 and 1997. This career transition represented a significant shift for Bears, who had become famous for her role as the feminist bank loan officer who constantly clashed with Al Bundy and his family throughout Married, with Children's controversial run. While she was still actively appearing on that show as one of its main cast members, Bears was simultaneously developing her skills as a television director by working on other sitcom productions during her time off from filming. Her directing work on Malcolm and Eddie came during a period when she was expanding her career beyond acting to include behind-the-scenes roles in television production, which was still relatively uncommon for actors who were starring in successful ongoing series. The experience of directing episodes that featured Malcolm Jamal Warner and Eddie Griffin gave Bears the opportunity to work with completely different types of comedy and character dynamics than what she experienced on her own show. The timing of her directing assignments was particularly interesting because it occurred during Malcolm and Eddie's early seasons, when the show was still finding its comedic voice and establishing the relationship between its 2 main characters. Bears's experience as a performer on one of television's most successful and longest-running sitcoms likely provided valuable insights that she could bring to her directing work, helping guide the newer show's development during its crucial first years, when many television series struggle to establish their identity and build an audience. Fact 12. Bronchula, the beloved truck. Eddie Griffin's character owned and operated a tow truck that he had affectionately named Bronchula, and this vehicle became such an important and beloved part of the show that it was featured prominently in storylines and referenced by name throughout multiple episodes during the series' 4-season run. The name Bronchula was a clever combination of Bronco, referring to the type of Ford truck that Eddie drove, and Dracula, the famous vampire character, creating a unique and memorable moniker that perfectly captured Eddie's playful personality and his tendency to give creative names to the important things in his life. This naming choice reflected the character's fun-loving nature and his ability to find humor and personality even in his work equipment. Bronchula wasn't just a background prop or an occasional reference, but rather served as a central element in several episode plots, particularly when the truck needed expensive repairs that Eddie couldn't afford, forcing him to find creative ways to earn the money necessary to get his primary source of income back on the road. The truck's mechanical problems created genuine dramatic tension for Eddie's character, since his entire towing business depended on having a reliable vehicle to respond to customer calls throughout Kansas City. The writers and producers understood that Bronchula had become an important part of the show's identity, so they continued to feature the truck in storylines, where Eddie's relationship with his vehicle served as both a source of comedy and a way to explore his character's dedication to his small business. The truck represented Eddie's independence and entrepreneurial spirit, making it much more than just a piece of equipment, but rather a symbol of his dreams and ambitions in the competitive towing industry. Fact 13. The dramatic season. 3004 transformation. Malcolm and Eddie underwent such a dramatic transformation between seasons 2 and 3 that many fans described it as becoming a completely different show, with significant cast changes, improved writing quality, and a major shift away from the crude humor that had characterized the earlier episodes. The first 2 seasons had featured storylines and comedy that many viewers found disturbing and uncomfortable, particularly the way characters constantly made fun of Tim because of his weight, and how Eddie frequently made disparaging comments about Nicolette's appearance, treating her as if she were unattractive despite her obvious beauty. This type of humor created an unpleasant viewing experience that left many fans feeling disgusted by the mean-spirited nature of the jokes and character interactions. When the show returned for its 3rd season, the producers had clearly listened to feedback and made conscious decisions to completely overhaul their approach to comedy and character development. The writing became much more sophisticated and funny without relying on cruel personal attacks or body shaming, While the storylines became more engaging and allowed viewers to actually invest in the characters' relationships and personal growth, the cast changes also contributed to the improved atmosphere, with new characters being introduced who brought fresh energy and different types of comedic situations that didn't depend on making fun of people's physical appearances or personal insecurities. The show also began featuring more impressive guest stars who elevated the overall quality of individual episodes and provided new opportunities for Malcolm and Eddie to interact with interesting characters from outside their usual Kansas City social circle, creating storylines that were both funnier and more respectful to all the characters involved. Fact 14. Warner's secret directing career. Malcolm Jamal Warner wasn't just the star of Malcolm and Eddie, but also secretly directed 17 episodes throughout the show's 4-season run, making him one of the most hands-on actor-directors in television during the 1990s, and adding another layer to his already impressive behind-the-scenes resume. This directing work represented a continuation of Warner's passion for working behind the camera that had begun during his time on The Cosby Show, where he had started learning about television production and developing his skills as a filmmaker while still performing as an actor. His interest in directing had already led him to work on music videos for major artists like New Edition and rapper Special Ed, as well as episodes of other popular sitcoms including The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, All That, and Kenan and Kel. Warner's dual role as both star and director on Malcolm and Eddie gave him significant creative control over the show's development, which may have helped him address some of the concerns he had about the show's direction and tone that he frequently discussed with writers and producers. Having the opportunity to direct episodes allowed him to influence the storytelling and character development from behind the camera, potentially steering the show toward the kind of comedy he felt more comfortable creating. The fact that Warner directed 17 episodes out of the show's total 89 episodes means he was responsible for nearly 20% of the series' overall creative direction, which is an unusually high percentage for an actor who was also serving as one of the two main stars. This level of involvement demonstrates his commitment to the project, despite his creative disagreements with the network, and his desire to help shape the show into something that better reflected his vision for quality television. Comedy. Fact 15. Ted Lang and Ed McMahon's failed commercial. Malcolm and Eddie managed to secure two of television's most recognizable personalities, Ted Lang from The Love Boat and Ed McMahon from The Tonight Show, to appear as spokesmen in a commercial for their Kansas City sports bar, but the entire project fell apart when the director made the bizarre decision to exclude the bar's actual owners from appearing in their own advertisement. The episode featuring this storyline showed Malcolm and Eddie's excitement about landing such impressive celebrity endorsements for McGee's, since both Lang and McMahon were household names who could have brought significant credibility and attention to their small business. Ted Lang had become famous worldwide for playing Isaac the bartender on The Love Boat, while Ed McMahon was known to millions of viewers as Johnny Carson's longtime sidekick and the booming voice behind "Here's Johnny" on The Tonight Show for 30 years. However, the commercial production took an unexpected turn when the director, Johnny Beaumont, decided that he wanted to create an advertisement that featured only the celebrity spokesman without including Malcolm and Eddie themselves in any part of the commercial. This decision struck both bar owners as completely ridiculous, since they were paying for the advertisement and felt strongly that they should be prominently featured in promotional materials for their own establishment. When Malcolm and Eddie expressed their concerns about being excluded from their own commercial, the situation escalated into a confrontation that ultimately led to the director quitting the entire project in frustration. Ted Lang and Ed McMahon, apparently unwilling to continue working on a commercial project that had become contentious and disorganized, decided to follow the director's lead and also withdrew from the advertisement, leaving Malcolm and Eddie without their celebrity spokesman, and back to square one with their marketing plans.